Hey Gemini, welcome back, beautiful soul. I'm really happy you're here. As always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't because this is a general reading and it may connect with your situation differently than someone else's. For this reading, we're going to take a look at the energies surrounding someone who hasn't been able to stop thinking about you. Someone who may be missing you far more than they let on, yet still seems unwilling to reach out. And honestly, Gemini, before I even pull all the cards, the energy feels quiet but very loud at the same time. It's almost like somebody is trying their best to keep their thoughts under control, but your name, your voice, your presence just keeps finding its way back into their mind. So, let's slow down for a moment, take a deep breath, and see what the cards want to reveal. Okay, Gemini, the first card that catches my attention here is the Six of Cups, and honestly, the moment it appears, it feels like somebody's mind drifting back to a place they keep telling themselves they're done revisiting. But they're not. No matter how hard they try, they're not. You know what's interesting? I don't even feel like this person is sitting around intentionally thinking about you all day. That's not the energy I'm getting. It's more like they keep bumping into memories of you. A song plays. A joke reminds them of something you said. They hear a phrase that sounds like something you would have laughed at. And suddenly, there you are again, back in their thoughts, back in their chest, back in that space they've been trying so hard to organize and control. And honestly, Gemini, I think what they miss most isn't even one specific moment. It's the feeling of talking to you, the feeling of being understood by you, the feeling of never quite knowing where a conversation would go, because there was always something exciting, something unexpected, something alive about your energy. You brought movement into their world. You made ordinary moments feel different, and they remember that, far more than they've admitted. The star's sitting here, and there's something very beautiful about the way it's showing up. Because this person still carries an image of you, almost like a photograph that never faded. Life may have changed. Circumstances may have changed. People around them may have changed. But the version of you that lives in their heart somehow stayed untouched. It's strange, because I don't think they planned for that to happen. I think they assumed enough time would eventually erase things. But instead, what happened was the opposite. The distance gave them perspective. The silence gave them perspective. And little by little, they started realizing just how much space you occupied in their emotional world. I keep hearing this energy of comparison. They meet people, they talk to people, life keeps moving, but somehow there is always this unconscious comparison happening in the background. Not because they're trying to replace you, not because they're trying to recreate what happened, but because something about you left a very specific imprint, and they haven't found it anywhere else. The Page of Swords is fascinating here because it feels restless. Like somebody trying very hard not to look while continuing to look, trying not to wonder while continuing to wonder, trying not to care while secretly caring quite a bit. For some of you, this person may occasionally check on you, maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe through little pieces of information that somehow find their way back to them. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just enough to know how you're doing, just enough to know you're okay. And honestly, sometimes just enough to miss you all over again. Because every time they see you doing well, every time they see you growing, every time they see you living your life, there is this strange mixture of emotions, pride, admiration, longing, regret, hope, all tangled together. And I don't think they've fully unpacked those feelings yet. The Nine of Cups feels softer, warmer, almost like somebody sitting alone with thoughts they don't necessarily share. You know those moments when the world finally gets quiet? When there are no distractions left, no work, no noise, no notifications, no responsibilities demanding attention. That's where I feel this person's thoughts becoming the loudest. Because that's when they remember the conversations, the late night exchanges, the random stories, the moments that seemed small at the time, but somehow became unforgettable later. And I feel like they're surprised by how much they still remember. Not just the important moments, the little things, the way you worded certain sentences, the things that made you laugh. The habits you probably don't even realize you have. That's what keeps showing up here, which tells me this wasn't surface level for them. Whether they admitted it or not, whether they expressed it or not, something about this connection reached deeper than they expected. And Gemini, I have to say this. The energy doesn't feel desperate. It doesn't feel chaotic. It doesn't even feel dramatic. It feels persistent, like a thought that keeps returning, like a song that quietly stays in someone's head long after it ends. Because every time they think they've moved beyond it, something pulls them back. Every time they think they've figured out what this connection meant, another layer reveals itself. And I think that's what makes this so complicated for them. They're not just remembering you. They're trying to understand why they can't stop remembering you, why your presence still lingers, why your energy still feels close even when physical distance exists, why certain memories refuse to fade. And as I sit with these cards, especially the Six of Cups beside the star, it feels like they're beginning to ask themselves questions they avoided before, questions that don't have quick answers, questions about timing, questions about feelings, questions about what this connection truly meant to them. And honestly, Gemini, I don't think they've reached the end of those questions yet. If anything, it feels like they're only beginning to realize how much there still is to uncover. Something feels different here, Gemini. Because as I sit with these cards, especially the Queen of Swords and the Sun appearing together, I get the sense that this person is looking back at you through completely different eyes than they once did. And honestly, I don't think they realized what they were looking at when you first entered their life. Sometimes people meet someone extraordinary during a chapter when they're too distracted, too overwhelmed, or too emotionally unavailable to recognize what is standing right in front of them. And that's what this feels like. It feels like they saw you, but they didn't truly see you. Not yet. You know, there is something about your energy that keeps coming through as incredibly self-contained. Not closed off, not distant, just complete. The Queen of Swords doesn't feel concerned with proving anything. She doesn't need constant validation. She doesn't need everyone to agree with her. She simply knows who she is. And for whatever reason, that energy is standing out to this person more than ever. Because the more they observe life around them, the more unusual your energy begins to feel. Not because you're perfect, nobody is, but because there was an authenticity about you that they haven't encountered very often. You said what you meant. You showed up as yourself. You weren't trying to become whatever somebody wanted you to be. And honestly, that's rare. The funny thing is, Gemini, I think there was a period where they almost took that for granted. Not intentionally, it was just there. Like sunshine coming through a window every morning. People don't always stop to appreciate something until they realize how different life feels without it. And the sun is coming through very strongly here. This card doesn't feel dramatic. It feels warm, comfortable, safe. Like somebody remembering what it felt like to laugh without forcing it. What it felt like to enjoy a conversation without constantly monitoring every word. What it felt like to spend time with someone and leave feeling lighter instead of heavier. And I think that's something they've been reflecting on lately. Because life has a funny way of teaching perspective. People move, situations change, years pass, and suddenly certain memories start glowing in a way they didn't before. Not because the memories changed, because the person looking at them changed. That's exactly what this feels like. A shift in perspective, a deeper understanding, an awareness that wasn't available before. The Magician is interesting because it feels like they're beginning to connect dots. Pieces of the puzzle that once seemed unrelated are suddenly forming a bigger picture. They're looking back at conversations, looking back at choices, looking back at moments that seemed ordinary at the time, and they're realizing how much was actually happening beneath the surface. Honestly, I keep hearing this energy of admiration. Not infatuation, admiration. There is a difference. Infatuation tends to focus on fantasy. Admiration focuses on reality. This person isn't just remembering how attractive you are. They're remembering how capable you are, how adaptable you are, how quickly you can navigate change, how naturally you connect with different kinds of people. And the more they think about it, the more difficult it becomes to compare anyone else to you. Because what made you special wasn't one thing. It was the combination of everything: your intelligence, your humor, your curiosity, your ability to be serious one moment and playful the next. The way conversations never seemed to run out when you were around. And I feel like they're only fully appreciating that now. The Nine of Pentacles brings in another layer, because this person sees growth, a lot of growth. Whether they're actively watching you or simply sensing it from afar, there is an awareness that you haven't stayed frozen in time. You've continued building your life. You've continued evolving. You've continued becoming more of who you are. And strangely enough, that doesn't push them away. It draws their attention even more, because they expected life to slow you down. Maybe they expected setbacks. Maybe they expected disappointment. Maybe they assumed the world would eventually dim some of your light. But instead, from their perspective, you seem stronger, more grounded, more confident, more comfortable in your own skin. And that's forcing them to reevaluate things. It's forcing them to revisit assumptions they once made about you. You know, I keep getting this image of somebody sitting quietly after a long day, not doing anything dramatic, not making big decisions, just thinking, reflecting, realizing. And that's where this energy feels like it's sitting. Not in action, not yet, in realization. The kind of realization that sneaks up on people, the kind that happens slowly, one observation at a time, one memory at a time, one moment of honesty at a time. Because what they're beginning to understand is that Gemini wasn't simply another person passing through their life. There was something distinct about you, something difficult to replace, something they may not have fully valued while it was available to them. And the more that truth settles in, the harder it becomes for them to dismiss it. The harder it becomes to convince themselves that this connection was ordinary. Because it wasn't. And as these cards continue unfolding, it feels like this awareness is leading them towards something deeper. Something that goes beyond admiration. Something that forces them to confront emotions they've been trying to organize, explain, or even avoid for much longer than they care to admit. Something about this energy becomes much quieter here, Gemini. Not because the feelings are disappearing. If anything, they feel stronger. But they feel heavier too. Because once somebody begins seeing the truth of a situation, they eventually have to face the truth about themselves. And honestly, that's where things get uncomfortable. The moon is sitting here, and the first thing I notice is how much uncertainty surrounds this person's inner world. Not uncertainty about you, uncertainty about themselves. There was a period where they kept convincing themselves that they needed more time, more clarity, more proof, more certainty before they could make sense of what they were feeling. But emotions don't always work that way. Sometimes feelings arrive long before explanations do. And I think that's exactly what happened here. This person felt something significant. They felt the connection. They felt the pull. They felt the comfort. But instead of trusting it, they started analyzing it, questioning it, dissecting it, trying to understand every possible outcome before allowing themselves to experience what was actually happening. And somewhere along the way, fear quietly took the driver's seat. I keep hearing the phrase, what if I'm wrong? Not because they doubted you, because they doubted themselves. What if they opened up and got hurt? What if they finally admitted how they felt and things changed? What if they allowed themselves to become vulnerable and lost control of the situation? The moon feels like somebody standing in front of a door for a very long time, wanting to open it, knowing what's behind it matters, yet somehow remaining frozen. And the longer they stood there, the harder it became to move. The Two of Swords feels connected to that same paralysis, because this wasn't somebody who didn't care. Honestly, Gemini, people who don't care usually don't spend this much energy avoiding a decision. This feels like somebody who kept standing between two worlds. One part of them wanted to step forward. The other part wanted to stay protected. One part wanted connection. The other part wanted safety. And when those two desires are constantly fighting each other, indecision becomes its own kind of prison. I feel like there were moments when they almost reached out. Moments when they almost said what was sitting on their heart. Moments when they almost let their guard down. And then something would happen. A doubt, a fear, an insecurity, a memory. And suddenly they would retreat again, which explains why their energy may have felt inconsistent. Why they sometimes moved closer, only to disappear afterward. Why they gave signals they weren't prepared to follow through on. It wasn't always about the connection itself. A lot of it was happening inside of them. The Nine of Swords carries a very different feeling. This isn't avoidance anymore. This is awareness, because eventually the distractions stop working. Eventually the excuses become harder to believe. Eventually a person is left alone with their own thoughts. And that's where I feel this person's spending more time lately. Thinking, replaying, reflecting, not only on what happened, but on what they contributed to what happened. Because there is a difference. For a long time they may have focused on circumstances, timing, distance, complications, external factors. But the energy feels more personal now, more honest. They're beginning to look at their own choices, their own hesitation, their own silence. And honestly, Gemini, I think that's where some regret is starting to surface. Not dramatic regret, not self-pity. Just the realization that fear can cost people things they genuinely care about. I keep getting the sense that this person knows there were moments when you needed clarity, moments when you needed consistency, moments when you needed honesty, and instead of giving those things, they gave uncertainty. Whether intentional or not, whether they meant to or not, the result was the same. And I think they're becoming increasingly aware of that. There is something humbling about this energy, because it's forcing them to acknowledge parts of themselves they may not have wanted to examine before. The fears, the insecurities, the avoidance, the emotional walls, all the things that felt easier to ignore when life was moving quickly. And then judgment arrives. And honestly, the atmosphere changes the moment this card appears. Because this doesn't feel like punishment, it feels like realization. The kind of realization that arrives after a long period of inner conflict. The kind that says, I can't keep pretending I don't know what I know. Because that's the thing about awareness. Once it arrives, it becomes difficult to go back. This person knows how they feel, maybe not every detail, maybe not every answer, but enough. Enough to recognize that this connection affected them. Enough to recognize that you mattered. Enough to recognize that some of their decisions were driven by fear rather than truth. And that's a very vulnerable place to be. Because awareness creates responsibility. Once someone sees the role they played in a situation, they can no longer blame everything outside themselves. And I feel like that's exactly where this person is standing. Not fully at peace. Not fully resolved, but more honest than they've been before. More willing to look directly at what they've been avoiding. Because the deeper they go into these realizations, the harder it becomes to ignore one particular question. A question that seems to be growing louder every time they think about you. Not whether they care. Not whether you mattered. Those answers are becoming increasingly clear. The question they're wrestling with now is what they're supposed to do with those feelings once they finally stop running from them. Something shifts here, Gemini. Not inside them at first, inside you. And honestly, I think that's what catches them off guard more than anything else. Because for a long time, whether they realized it or not, there was a certain rhythm between the two of you. A pattern, an unspoken expectation. If they pulled away, somehow you would still be there. If they became distant, somehow the connection would remain available. If they needed more time, more space, more answers, life would simply pause and wait for them to figure things out. But life doesn't work that way forever. People grow, people heal, people get tired. And I feel like something inside you reached a point where survival became more important than waiting. Strength is sitting right at the center of this energy. Not loud strength, not angry strength, not the kind that announces itself. This feels like quiet strength, the kind that develops after disappointment, the kind that forms when someone finally realizes they can't carry an entire connection by themselves. Because I don't see you trying to prove anything anymore. I don't see you chasing explanations. I don't see you spending every waking moment wondering what they're doing or why they're acting the way they are. Honestly, Gemini, this feels like somebody slowly returning home to themselves, and that's beautiful. Because sometimes the hardest thing a person can do is stop trying to fix what isn't theirs to fix, you know? I keep seeing this image of someone setting down a heavy suitcase they've been carrying for far too long. Not because they stopped caring, because they're exhausted. Because they've realized they deserve moments of peace too. And that's where your energy feels different. You're beginning to invest more energy into your own life, your own goals, your own healing, your own happiness. And strangely enough, that's exactly when this person starts paying closer attention. The Four of Cups carries a very interesting emotional tone, because I don't think they expected this change. I think somewhere in the back of their mind, they assumed things would remain exactly as they left. Them. That the emotional door would stay open indefinitely. That your patience had no limits. That your understanding had no boundaries. And suddenly they're realizing that's not true. Not because you've become cold. Not because you've become bitter. Because you've become realistic. And honestly, that realization is making them uncomfortable. Because for the first time, they're beginning to understand that opportunities aren't infinite. Connections don't remain suspended in time forever. People don't stay exactly where you left them. Life keeps moving. And I feel like that's creating a level of anxiety they haven't fully experienced before. There is a subtle sadness surrounding this card, not dramatic sadness. Just the realization that something valuable may not always remain available. And that realization feels very new to them. The Eight of Cups deepens this energy even more. Because I don't actually see you walking away from love. I see you walking toward yourself. There's a difference. One comes from anger, the other comes from self-respect. And I think this person is finally recognizing that. They're starting to see that your silence isn't a game. Your distance isn't manipulation. Your focus isn't punishment. It's growth. It's maturity. It's somebody deciding they deserve more than confusion. And oddly enough, that may be one of the things they admire most right now. Because it takes courage to stop waiting. It takes courage to release expectations. It takes courage to accept that another person's journey belongs to them, not to you. The more they observe this shift, the more they begin questioning themselves. Because while you've been moving forward, they've been standing in place emotionally, still wrestling with the same fears, still debating the same questions, still carrying the same uncertainties. And suddenly that contrast becomes impossible to ignore. I think that's where death enters this reading. And honestly, Gemini, this card feels much more personal than relational. This isn't about an ending between two people. This is about the ending of an old version of reality, an old belief system, an old dynamic. Because something about the connection has fundamentally changed. The version of you that waited endlessly, changing. The version of them that assumed they had unlimited time, changing. The old cycle that kept repeating itself, changing. And I don't think they're fully prepared for that realization, because there is a difference between knowing someone matters and realizing you could actually lose access to them. The second realization tends to hit much harder. I keep hearing this energy of surprise, not because you've disappeared, not because you've become unavailable, but because you've become less centered around them. Your world is expanding. Your focus is expanding. Your energy is expanding. And they can feel it. Maybe they can't explain it. Maybe they don't fully understand why it affects them so deeply, but they feel it. They feel the difference between someone waiting at the door and someone choosing to explore the world beyond it. And honestly, I think that's creating a level of urgency inside them that wasn't there before. Because people often assume they'll have another chance tomorrow, another opportunity next week, another conversation somewhere down the road, until one day they realize life isn't offering guarantees. Only moments, only choices, only opportunities that exist for as long as they exist. And as I look at these cards together, especially strength beside death, it feels like the person is being forced to confront a truth they can no longer avoid. Not about the connection itself, not about how they feel. Those realizations have already begun. This truth feels different. This truth asks a much harder question. What happens when the person you've been quietly expecting to wait for you finally starts choosing themselves instead? Because that question seems to be echoing louder and louder through their thoughts. And for the first time, they don't seem entirely sure they like the answer. Something inside this person feels very different here, Gemini. Not because all of their fears have disappeared, not because every question has been answered, but because avoiding the truth is becoming more exhausting than facing it. And honestly, that's a powerful turning point. The Ace of Swords appears, and the energy immediately sharpens. Everything feels clearer, more direct, more honest. For a long time, this person has been living inside their own head, thinking, analyzing, replaying scenarios, creating explanations, creating excuses, creating reasons why they should wait, reasons why they should stay silent, reasons why they should keep everything locked away. But eventually there comes a moment when all of that mental noise becomes impossible to carry. And I feel like that's exactly where this person is standing. Because the truth keeps finding its way back to them. No matter how they try to organize it, no matter how they try to rationalize it, the truth remains. The connection mattered. You mattered. And what happened between the two of you continues to matter. You know, Gemini, I don't think this person wants another unfinished chapter. That's the feeling I'm getting. They're tired of conversations that never happened. Tired of words that stayed trapped inside their chest. Tired of carrying thoughts that never reached the person they were meant for. Because silence can feel safe for a while. But after enough time, silence starts creating its own kind of pain. The Ace of Swords feels like somebody becoming honest with themselves first. And honestly, that's usually the hardest conversation of all. The Knight of Cups carries such a different energy. It's softer, more vulnerable, less guarded. And that's important because this person doesn't feel like they're approaching this situation from ego anymore. They're approaching it from emotion. For some of you, I keep getting the feeling that they've rehearsed conversations in their mind more times than they would ever admit. Little speeches, little explanations, little moments where they imagine finally saying what they couldn't say before. Not because they're trying to be perfect, because they desperately want to be understood. Because somewhere deep down they know that what you saw was only part of the story. You saw the hesitation, you saw the inconsistency, you saw the distance, but you may not have seen everything happening underneath it. The fears, the doubts, the insecurities, the emotional confusion, the inner battles they were fighting in private. And honestly, Gemini, I think part of them wishes they had explained that sooner, not to excuse anything, just to help you understand. Because there is a difference. The Knight of Cups feels like somebody who wants to remove the misunderstandings that have built up over time. Not somebody trying to rewrite history, just somebody wanting their truth to finally be heard. And then I see the Six of Cups again, which is interesting because this card has traveled through the entire reading like a thread, connecting everything together. And every time it appears, I feel the same thing: memory, nostalgia, emotion. But this time it feels more personal, less about remembering the past, more about remembering what was real. Because I think this person has spent a lot of time asking themselves why they can't move on from this connection the way they expected, why certain memories remain vivid, why certain moments still feel emotionally alive, why your presence continues to exist inside their thoughts long after they expected it to fade. And the answer seems surprisingly simple, because what they felt was real, maybe complicated, maybe imperfect, maybe unfinished, but real. And that's becoming harder for them to deny. I keep hearing somebody say, I should have said something. Not necessarily one specific thing, just something, anything, a truth, an explanation, a confession, a clarification, a conversation. Because the longer silence stretched between the two of you, the more difficult it became to break it. And yet, here we are, looking at cards that don't feel silent anymore, looking at cards that feel ready, ready for honesty, ready for vulnerability, ready for something that has been waiting beneath the surface for a very long time. The Lovers arrives and everything slows down, not in a dramatic way, in a meaningful way. Because this card doesn't feel focused on fantasy. It feels focused on choice. And honestly, Gemini, I think that's what this entire journey has been building toward. Choice. This person spent so much time living in uncertainty, living in hesitation, living in fear, and eventually every road leads back to a decision. Not because someone forces it, because avoiding the decision becomes impossible. I don't think they're looking at you through the same lens anymore. You're no longer just a memory. You're no longer just a possibility. You're no longer just someone from the past. You've become someone they have to be honest about. Someone they have to acknowledge. Someone they have to stop pretending didn't affect them. And there is something very emotional about that realization. Because once someone reaches that point, they can no longer hide behind confusion. They can no longer pretend they don't know how they feel. They can no longer keep placing responsibility on timing or circumstances or external factors. The focus returns to the heart. And the heart tends to ask very simple questions. Questions that are difficult to escape. Questions like, what do I really want? What am I afraid of? And how much longer am I willing to let fear speak louder than truth? As I sit with these cards, I don't feel the energy of someone who has all the answers. I feel the energy of someone who is finally becoming willing to speak. Someone who is beginning to understand that honesty may be uncomfortable, but carrying everything alone has become even heavier. And the closer they move toward that realization, the more it feels like something important is quietly taking shape beneath the surface. Something that has less to do with fear than before, and much more to do with courage. And Gemini, as we close out this reading, the biggest thing I keep coming back to is this. Sometimes the most important shifts happen long before anyone says a single word, long before a text message is sent, long before a conversation finally takes place, long before two people find themselves sitting across from each other again. Something has been changing beneath the surface here, not just within this connection, but within the people involved. And honestly, that's what makes this energy feel so meaningful. Because growth has a way of revealing truths that fear once kept hidden. For now, allow yourself to stay where you are. Keep focusing on your own path. Keep choosing yourself. Keep building the life that's calling you forward. Whatever someone else is sorting through emotionally belongs to their journey. Your responsibility is simply to keep honoring yours. Thank you so much for sharing this space with me today. I truly appreciate your time, your energy, and your presence. Take gentle care of yourself, Gemini, and until our paths cross again, keep shining exactly the way you were meant to. Bye for now.